So I think it started. And I am Cheryl from Simply Natal Healing Birth Doula, and I'm here with Frankie from the Hypnobirthing Company to talk about her healing birth experience that happened 6 weeks ago. So brand new, fresh.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear all about it. I think, first of all, though, you might as well tell us a little bit about you, Frankie, and about the background and kind of how you got here in the first place.
Yeah, so I originally was a primary school teacher, and I lived abroad in Thailand with my husband and worked out there for a good few years. When we got married out there, we decided we were ready to start a family. Unfortunately, it took us a little bit longer than we thought, and we did lose 3 pregnancies whilst we were out there. On the 4th pregnancy, we decided we were going to move back to the UK. We felt like we needed to be back in the UK where we had some family support and support from friends. So we moved back to the UK at the start of my 2nd trimester, and luckily that pregnancy was really positive and there was no hiccups. It was a really nice experience. It was hard work, like most pregnancies are, and I was quite poorly in the beginning. I was sick a lot, and I found the changes quite overwhelming. There was a lot of things happening to my body that I just had no clue about. So yeah, we then had our first daughter. After having an emergency section, I'd really sort of hoped for a natural birth, or as natural as possible. I'd sort of started to look into hypnobirthing when I was pregnant. I'd heard about it and I thought, oh, that might be something that helps, because labor's awful and scary and horrible, and apparently hypnobirthing is what the celebs do. So I naively thought, yes, I'll do that. So I bought a book, read the book, but just read the bits about how to cope in labor. Didn't really read any of the other bits, didn't take any of it in, and just thought, yeah, this is the breathing that you do in labor, this is what you visualize, and then your labor goes perfectly. That's what I'm going to do. And I did do quite a lot of practice with the techniques when I was pregnant, and I got my husband quite on board with them. I didn't know about my rights in birth. I didn't know about the options available to me. I didn't know what type of interventions there were and what the risks and benefits were of them. I really didn't know very much, actually, at all. I thought I did.
I thought you did.
I didn't know as much as I should have done, I think. And yes, unfortunately, that birth did not go as I had hoped for. Luckily, me and the baby were perfectly healthy and fine, and I'd often said to myself, as long as the baby's healthy, then that's all that matters.
And I couldn't say you'd heard that before.
I would quickly say that idea
a lot, isn't it? That all that matters is,
yeah. And even my partner was drilling that into me and himself, our family. You hear it all the time, and it wasn't long after having her that I realized, no, that's not all that matters. Yes, it matters, but I matter too, and my experience and my feelings and my partner's experience and feelings, they matter as well. And I think I suffered a bit of PTSD after that birth. I was never diagnosed with anything, but I'd have things like flashbacks. I've struggled to sleep at the beginning. It was just at the front of my mind all the time. And, you're quite hormonal anyway after you've had a baby, but that was just an added layer of things for me to deal with. And it took me, and I'm still dealing with it now, I think. It took me a long time to sort of come to terms with it. And that's really what propelled me into looking more into hypnobirthing and more into how things could have gone differently, what I could have done differently, how my body would have worked differently. And that's what sort of led me to become a hypnobirthing teacher and start the Hypnobirthing Company. And then since then, I've sort of thrown myself into research and into talking to different people, to different doulas, to midwives, to women who have had all different types of experience, and just try and gain more knowledge and understanding. And all of that has really helped me process that first birth. And then I quite quickly after my daughter was born, I found out I was pregnant again, which was a huge surprise for us. We were actively trying not to get pregnant. But yeah, it was a lovely surprise though. And it was a really positive pregnancy. In fact, I felt much better second time round, even though I was running around after a baby. She was 6 months when I found out I was pregnant. She was young. But yeah, I think, you know, you're busy with your little one, so you sort of forget about the pregnancy, so it flew by.
Yeah.
This time round, I was just so passionate about advocating for myself, finding out what options are available for me and my specific circumstances. And because I'd had that previous section, I felt like the care I received from the NHS was, they put me on the conveyor belt of care for someone who'd have a previous section. You know, I wasn't necessarily looked at as an individual with individual circumstances. It was sort of, this is what your options are: another section, or you can try for a vaginal birth, but these are the things that you will need to do. And that didn't sit well with me at all. And the more I researched, the more I discovered, the more I just was adamant on the birth that I wanted to try and give myself the opportunity to have. I knew that I couldn't magic the birth I want out of the air, but I knew that if there were certain things that I did and I practiced and that I pushed for, then my chances of a natural birth and the type of birth that I'd hoped for would increase. So me and my husband did a lot of preparation. It really opened my eyes as well to clients that I've worked with who have perhaps, you know, aimed to have a VBAC. I hadn't experienced that myself, so it was hard for me to sort of empathise with them and completely understand the situation they might be in. It also gave me a new insight into going against consultant wishes. That's not something I'd experienced. I was a bit of a yes man before that, and this time round I was not at all. So it taught me a lot of life lessons as well. And fortunately, all of that preparation, all of that work gave me a really positive birth experience. And I'm still on a high from that positive birth, that I'm so proud of myself, not only for birthing the baby, but for everything that I put in before that led me to get that birth. And I'm proud of myself for advocating, going to those appointments alone, things like that I found really tough. So yeah, and now 6 weeks on with my beautiful little girl, second girl, and it just really inspires me. What has happened to me, the positives and the negatives, has really inspired me to work with others and share the knowledge of, you know, birth preparation and education, and how hypnobirthing can help, and how sharing and talking can help. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll maybe try and dig a bit deeper on some of the things that you've mentioned then, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether after your first birth then you've done a little bit of the hypnobirthing stuff, and a lot of people who've tried a bit of hypnobirthing and then go on to have a difficult birth, a disappointing birth, or what they might call a traumatic birth, they might feel like they've been let down by the practice they did, the hypnobirthing that they did. Did you feel like that at all, or did you recognise that it wasn't that?
I think I did feel when I was pregnant that if I keep listening to these audio tracks and doing this breathing, I'll get the birth I want. And if the more I practice, the more likely I will get that. And then when I was in labour and I was doing these exercises, I was sort of thinking they were helping to an extent, definitely, but I was starting to waver and think, this isn't how I imagined it was going to be, or this isn't the experience that, you know, somebody else has had when they told me they used hypnobirthing. And I think that doubt crept in then when I was sort of in labour. Afterwards, it didn't take me very long to realise that actually what I was missing, it wasn't what I was doing that was the problem, it was what I was missing that was the problem. And there was this huge area of hypnobirthing and antenatal education that I had missed out on, because I didn't think I needed it. I didn't know I needed it. And I realised now, yes, those techniques that I was using in labour was really helping me, but the things that I hadn't learned about was perhaps what was hindering me. And even after that birth, I was so positive about hypnobirthing, hence why I went on to become a hypnobirthing instructor, because actually in my first birth I had a failed epidural and no pain relief worked in my circumstances. So all I had was the hypnobirthing techniques that I'd learned. The gas and air, I was really sick on that, so I wasn't able to have that. So that's all I had, and actually that's what got me through, and it kept me very calm. And even though the birth was, you know, slightly traumatic in certain parts, I was very calm and collected throughout. And there was never any point of, you know, full-on panic. And I think that was down to the hypnobirthing. So for me, I never really blamed the hypnobirthing, or I was never disappointed by it. In fact, I was the opposite.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So what was it? Can you identify now what part of that birth, what moments were the moments that really stuck with you as the negative bits, as the traumatic bits?
I think so. I was induced, and I think the push for induction was something that stuck with me. And it wasn't you know, someone was really breathing down my neck that I must do this or I must do that. It was very casually suggested to me that I would be induced, you know, 13 days past due date. And it was so casual, the way it was dropped in, and that it was going to be booked, and that I'm just going to ring the ward and get you booked in, that, you know, I didn't know that I had the option of not doing that or saying no to that. And I think now that really sort of gets to me a little bit, that it wasn't, even though nothing was sort of negative or said in a mean way, or I wasn't particularly coerced in an aggressive way, I was coerced in quite a friendly way, and that almost infuriates me more. And I'm sure the midwife, you know, she didn't mean any harm or anything like that. I think it's just she's so used to that's protocol, that's policy. There was not much of a conversation behind it, and that's something that has stuck in my mind a lot. And another thing that only until recently I've really thought about, but I can honestly say the most sort of uncomfortable, painful part of my first birth was when a cannula was fitted, not the cannula, when the IV was put into the cannula that was in my hand, because nobody told me they were doing it. They didn't ask if they could do it. Someone just grabbed my hand and shoved it in. And that hurt more than any part of my pregnancy, birth, postnatal recovery. That hurt. And it sort of took me back a little bit. When he did it, I sort of went, oh, that... and then I just thought, oh, be quiet, because, you know, they're getting on with this, with the C-section. And I looked at the doctor or whoever it was that had done it in the eye and sort of thought, like, you know, in any other circumstance, I wouldn't let someone just do something to me like that hurt me without me saying something. And I think maybe that was, again, one of those things where that person didn't mean necessarily any harm. It was just they were getting on with their job. But without giving my consent for that to happen, it hurt. And I realise now it hurt me emotionally as well as it physically hurt me. It really had an impact, and I can still remember that really clearly. And so I think, yeah, not having been asked if something can be done, and me not being able to give consent, not being given the opportunity to give consent, that was, again, another thing that stuck in my mind. Yeah.
Frankie, that's made me feel really emotional, the way that you described that, because it seems like such a simple thing.
Yeah.
Simple part of the procedure, but also a really easy thing for someone to be able to just explain what they were doing and ask before they did it. That could have been so easily avoided.
Exactly.
I've got goosebumps all over me just the thought of, it's that silencing, isn't it? It's that moment of where you felt like your bodily autonomy was taken away from you, and you were silenced in that moment. There was nothing you could say or do. And it had already happened. It had already almost.
And you tell yourself, oh, it's fine. It's just a tiny little thing. You know, in the grand scheme of things, that's just a, you know, one small part of it. But actually, you know, over a year on, that still stuck with me, and I still think about that.
It's all these little moments that add up to the whole picture, isn't it? And when things like that really stand out to us, they become the overwhelming feeling that we get about an experience. So you know, my traumatic birth was very different to yours, but similarly, I could go through and pick out those little things that didn't need to be said or done when they were said or done, that stand out to me, and I remember more over and above the rest of it. And that could have so easily been avoided. I think that's important for people to understand. When they're given this care, when they're providing this care around us, that compassionate care is what makes the biggest difference to us when we're in this situation. Okay, so is there anything else about that experience then that you'd like to share or talk about?
I think the main thing I take from that birth was that it's important to feel that you are informed and that you are making a choice based on your individual situation. It's very easy to say yes to everything because the midwife or a doctor is telling you to do it, or that's what everyone else does, or that's what someone down the road did. It's very easy to say yes and hand over control to somebody else and sort of shy away from that responsibility of your birth. And I think that's definitely, I did that because I didn't know any differently. And I always try to say to people, whatever birth you want or you'd like, or, you know, whatever you have in your head around what your birth might be like, just try and take all of the information in and make a choice, and don't hand that choice over to somebody else. And if someone's trying to take that choice away from you, tell them, no, I need to think about this, I need time. You know, give yourself the opportunity to make the choice. That's something I wish I'd have done more of. Even if the choice I would have made would have been exactly what was being offered to me, at least I've taken some ownership of it, because afterwards it might feel okay at the moment, hand over the responsibility, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That might feel good at the time, but afterwards it really has a lasting impact, and it can affect your life in so many ways, not just, you know, that first postnatal period. It can affect you for such a long time, you know, forever. Yeah. I speak to so many women who have had their children over 30 years ago, and, you know, they desperately want to talk about how, you know, a decision was made for them, or, you know, something wasn't offered to them that should have been offered to them, or that they'd like to have done. And yeah, it just has such an impact that I definitely think people need to just be fully informed, whether that's you going out and finding that information or you asking for that information from your health professional.
Yeah, absolutely. So you knew that, and when you found out you were pregnant this time, so it wasn't the second time you were pregnant because you'd had some losses before, but when you found out you were pregnant again, you decided it was going to be different. So how did you set out to make these plans around creating a different experience for yourself?
So this time round, I think the moment we found out I was pregnant, I was very shocked, and it was not necessarily the ideal for us in the situation. We just had a baby, basically. I hadn't sort of gone back to work at that point or anything like that, so it was a big shock and a big.
Oh, you've gone on mute, Frankie.
Sorry. Yeah, it took me a bit of time to adjust, but I had this feeling of, oh, I can do it right this time. I'm gonna nail it and get it right. You know, I've got the opportunity to do this again. And we always said we'd have more than, you know, one child if we could, and we'd hope to have more in the future, but a bit further along than we did. But I just thought, this is going to be my healing second birth. This is going to be it, you know. And actually we'd had 3 previous losses before my first daughter was born. And so throughout her pregnancy, I sort of had that anxiety that this wasn't going to work out, something was going to go wrong, we weren't going to be taking a baby home. This time around, I thought, no, we're having this baby and we're having it the way I want to have it. And I was quite adamant that was going to happen. So I just threw myself into anything and everything I could find out about birth and about VBACs and options available, what I could do, who I could speak to about different things. So even really early on, I was sort of reading everything there was, listening to everything there was. And I did quite a few things this time round. So I did some work with you. And it was amazing. Even that first chat with you, I don't even think you spoke. I think it was just me just going through everything that had happened in the first birth, everything I wanted to happen, everything every midwife and consultant had said that had annoyed me. And I just needed somebody to say it all to, who could understand, who could sort of, who was engaged and listening and wanted to know about these things. Because I think at this point, my family was probably sick of hearing about it. But that support from you just really helped, and knowing that other people have been in the same situation as me before.
Yeah, because I remember
really helped.
when we spoke. How far along in your pregnancy were you then?
It was quite early on, I think.
Yeah. When we spoke, from what I remember, because it feels like ages ago now, you were like, I don't know if I can have a vaginal birth after a caesarean because it's so close together. I don't know if I can. And it was like you just needed to hear that.
Yeah.
If that's what you want.
I think literally that's all you probably said, like, yes, you can do this. And I think I had that thing where I was saying, you know, I couldn't find any statistics on the chances of a uterine rupture with births very close together. I still can't find that. And I've actually asked quite a few of the consultants who were adamant that I'd gotten myself pregnant is the words that they used. I'd gone and gotten myself pregnant.
Naughty girl.
I know, and I wondered how I'd done it to myself, but anyway, I'd gone and gotten myself pregnant so quickly that my chances of a uterine rupture were much higher. And I asked, what are the statistics? Please tell me, because I want to know that information so I can make a choice. And not one of them could tell me. They said they know it's higher, but they don't know how much higher. And I said, well, is it 95%? Is it 10%? Is it 1%? What are the chances? You know, give me something, because saying it's higher doesn't give me anything. And not one of them could give me any sort of statistic or any evidence to support that claim. So I found it hard, and I think I had that worry, I had that concern. Have I gotten myself pregnant too quickly? And the guilt and worry that brought was hard to deal with. But actually speaking to someone and who has the knowledge, or people who have experienced it themselves, saying, yes, you can do it. Just, that's all I needed. Oh, okay, I can. So I'm going to, I will then. And I definitely had the feeling of the worry that my body failed me last time. And I hate that I thought that, because my body did not fail me. The system failed me. That's where the failing lies, not with me, because I panicked afterwards that I'd physically failed and then mentally failed, because I agreed to have the section in the end. And that affected me. I thought, how am I going to have this baby and go through the birth if I've already failed? Even if my body works, emotionally and mentally, am I going to fail again? And now I get so angry at myself. I didn't fail at all. It was the situation, the way things panned out. Every single choice that was made led to what happened in the end. And actually things could have been done differently, or even said differently, and it would have impacted how my birth went in the end. It wasn't me that failed.
No, and it almost doesn't even matter. Like, you can feel so angry about, it could have been like this, and it could have been like this, and this could have happened. You can feel so angry about that, but it almost doesn't even matter once you get to the point where you're able to say, but none of it's my fault.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that happened, and it's not my fault. So it's okay. I can move on from that now. Yeah,
definitely. So, and I think I needed this second birth to be able to see that and to move on from it, and to know that I still had worth, I still was important, I still had the ability to be a good mother, whatever my birth ended up being like, or has been like in previous births. But yeah, I contacted you, and I also did the Chilled Mama HBAC online course, and that was really, really informative. That was so helpful, and I made my husband do it as well. I say made, I'd like to think that he willingly chose to do it. He willingly chose to do that, and that really got him on board for a home birth, because I was sat there saying to him, you know, for this birth I need movement. I don't want to be strapped to anything. I don't want anyone in my space. I don't want any equipment or, you know, cannulas in. You know, I don't want to be in the hospital until right at the last minute. I want to be in water. You know, I knew all of those things help labour progress. So I knew that. And when I was going to my consultant appointments, they were saying, so you are not going to go more than 41 weeks. You'll be induced at that point. You will, from the moment labour starts, you will be in hospital. You'll be strapped to the bed with the monitor on, have a cannula fitted. You will have a midwife there with you at all times. She won't leave the room. So that's how your birth's going to go. And I was sort of like, so that's the opposite. I was literally saying, I want to have movement. And they were going, no. And there just didn't seem to be any budge on their side. And I was explaining how I know if you're hooked up to the monitor, your chances of caesarean section increase. And I'm trying to actively avoid a caesarean section. So that's why I'm making that choice. I'm not opposed to intermittent monitoring, which was never offered to me by the doctor. I was the one that went away and researched other methods of monitoring and the pros and cons and benefits and risks depending on your circumstances, and came back to them. This is what I'd like to have instead of what you're suggesting I have. And that really infuriated me, that they never, if I hadn't have been the person that I was, I probably wouldn't have known the other options available to me. And they never disclosed that to me. Even when I was adamantly saying that's not what I want, they were sort of like, well, that's what you have. So yeah, so doing that HVAC course really helped. It gave me a lot of statistics. It gave me a lot of confidence to go into those consultant meetings, being able to put forward what I want and give the reasons why I want them and the statistics behind them. I didn't really need to give it any of those statistics, but it helped me so much. And I know it helps a lot of other clients that I've worked with. If they can see the evidence behind it, it really helps you make your decisions. And I did so much more.
Wanted a home birth? Did you know for sure you wanted?
At the start, I was sort of like a bit unsure. I knew that a home birth has a lot of positive outcomes, but I was in that scared stage. Oh, I've had a section not long ago. I need to be in hospital. And then as the weeks went on, after speaking to you, I was considering home birth. I wasn't too sure. And then actually the area where I live, our local hospital that is 10 minutes away, when COVID hit, the maternity unit got closed and all the care got moved to the next town along, which is a 30-minute drive for us. So that then, when I'd sort of got on board thinking, yeah, I think I might want a home birth, and then the hospital closed, that then panicked me that my 10-minute transfer would then take 30 minutes. And that was a big thing that gave me a bit of a wobble then about, oh, is that going to affect, if something was to change within the birth and I needed to transfer in, is that 30 minutes going to make a huge difference? And I spent a long time sort of weighing up my options, and me and my husband both decided that actually, regardless of that 30-minute transfer, a home birth would give us the best chance of having the birth we wanted, and we were adamant that that's what we were going to do. So yeah, as I got more pregnant, the home birth really became more and more of a how I'd picture my birth. When I'd visualize my birth, I did that a lot. I'd visualize how it's going to go, and every little detail. It was in my house, it was in my living room, it was at home, and I just knew that's what I needed to do. That's what was going to get me where I wanted to be. I was very open to the idea that transfer might need to happen for whatever reason. And I was with all the midwives, I said to them, like, I'm not one of these people who are gonna say, no, I'm not moving, I'm staying here. And I don't think anyone actually is.
No. That's the fear, that's the vision that people have of someone who's adamant they're going to home birth, that they will never move for under any circumstances. But everybody I've ever spoken to who's planned a home birth, they've had very clear lines in their mind that they won't cross. And as soon as this happens, we'll transfer. And as soon as this happens, we'll transfer.
It does seem ridiculous that you have to, and I had said this to some consultants, it's ridiculous that you have to say, I am not going to sacrifice my baby for a home birth or a water birth or whatever. I am sane and I am well, and I want a positive outcome the same as you. We're all working for the same positive end. So, you don't have to worry that I'm going to, run away and have my baby in a field because you've suggested going into hospital. Like, I'm happy to do that if it's necessary. And obviously most people are, but it is just insane that you have to say those words out loud to somebody.
You just want to be the one making the decisions.
Yeah.
You don't want making the decisions for you.
Definitely.
We can all assume that we want a healthy baby. Every person wants a healthy baby at the end of this.
Yeah.
And no one more so than the mother, the person carrying the baby themselves. So I'm so excited because I've only got little bits of this story so far. Tell me about how it actually happened. What was the birth like and how close was it to your visualization of it?
So I got to 40 weeks and I knew I was going to go over. I went over with my first baby and obviously was induced. So she came at bang on 42 weeks after the induction. But I knew, and I know the percentage of babies that come on the due date. So that was sort of like out the window. I'm due around this time, but due date came. And soon as that due date comes, as you know, and as I'm sure many people know, the pressure for induction gets piled on then, and the pressure for sweeps gets piled on as well. And I went to my 40-week appointment. Oh no, 30. I was 1 day shy of 40 weeks, and I went to the midwife and she said, "Do you want to do a sweep today?" And I said, "No, I don't even feel anywhere near giving birth. I know my body, and I know my body's not ready, so no." And I had a consultant appointment the next day, so bang on my 40-week appointment, and that was awful appointment actually. It was probably the worst one I've ever had. So again, it was a consultant I'd never met before, someone new who was reading my notes to me whilst I was sat in front of him the first time he'd sort of read anything about me. And he didn't actually know I was hoping for a home birth. He just knew I wanted a natural birth this time. And he really was not helpful, and sort of just anything that I'd wanted or suggested that might be a good option for me, he just shut down completely. He questioned my mental health. He could not understand why I didn't want a sweep. And I said, I am considering it, because I'd had a chat with the midwife prior, pros and cons to having a sweep. I said, I am considering it, but I want to go home and speak to my husband about it before I make any decisions. And he was not happy that I would want to talk to the father of my child about options available to us. But and he said, you've clearly got some PTSD from your first birth, so you need to have a planned caesarean section. And I said, why? I wasn't even angry. I just said, why? Because I thought, he's very adamant. Does he know something I don't? Has there been some new research that only he knows about? And he just said, you clearly need things to be planned out so that it's not stressful in an emergency situation. And I said, but why would it be an emergency situation? And he said, well, it will be if you try and keep going and let labour start on its own. So you need to plan. And he just kept going and going and going. And he then calmed down with the C-section and said I needed to have an induction booked. And it was out of his hands, because it was hospital policy that 13 days over due date, everyone gets booked for an induction. It was out of his hands. And I said, well, I don't want you to. And he said, there's no point talking about it. It's out of my hands. So he booked that for me. And he'd written it down on my notes and said, hand your notes to the midwife as you leave, and she'll book that in. And at this point, I just wanted to leave the room, and I would have said yes to anything to get out of that room, to be honest. And when someone questions your mental health and makes you so angry that you fill with tears, but I was thinking, do not cry, because he's just questioned if I'm mentally stable, and if I cry right now. So I was really holding it together behind my mask, and spoke to the midwife as I came out, and she said, okay, we'll book you in for your induction. And I said, you can book it in, but I'm not coming. She said, oh, what do you mean? And I said to her, I just said that to get out of that room, because that doctor was really rude to me and did not respect or listen to any of my wishes. And she just said, okay, so what would you like to do? And she was so lovely. Thank God for her, because I really felt, I was holding it together, but I really felt like my nerves were just shaking by that conversation. And we sort of decided that I was going to go, if baby hadn't have come, I would go 13 days, would go in to be assessed and monitored, and another scan, and just see how the placenta was doing, how my fluid was, how baby was, how I was, and we'd make a decision from there. All I kept saying is I wanted to give myself 42 weeks and that opportunity to go into spontaneous labour. That's all I wanted. I'm not saying I would never have had a section or never have had an induction. I just wanted the 42 weeks. That's all. And she really understood that and was super kind about it. But I did cry the whole way home in the car after that. And I felt just really angry, and I just felt like I'm going to get induced. I'm going to end up being induced. What do I do? Do I just go for a section before and not get induced, not even try to be induced? Do I only say I'll take a certain amount of induction and stop at a certain point? Because I had a bit of a thing with the Pitocin hormone drip with my previous birth. That was something that I really felt I didn't want again. I was strongly against that. So, you know, I was saying to my husband, what do we do? Do we let them break my waters and see what happens? And if it doesn't happen, do we, you know, and all of the scenarios that could possibly happen, we were trying to talk through and what decisions we'd make. And it really stressed me out. So a week later, get to 41 weeks, and I go to my midwife appointment, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to have a sweep. And that was my decision. And I know I'd messaged you about it, hadn't I, saying, oh, yeah, I'm so torn.
I'm trying to think, where did that fit in then? Was it after this horrendous appointment that you messaged?
It was, I messaged you as I was in the waiting room before I had that horrendous appointment. I'd seen the midwife, and the nice midwife who would talk me through if I was going to have a sweep or not. And I'd gone to the appointment with, no, I'm not having one. And after talking to her, the thing that she said, which I don't know if this is the right thing or not, but she'd sort of said, I know how much you want this home birth, and I'm scared it's going to slip away if you don't try to get labour going spontaneously, even though it's an induction. You know what I mean? And that
said the opposite to that. I said, I know how much you want this home birth, so I think you would regret having a sweep.
I was so torn. I'd had sweeps with my previous birth and they didn't work. I wasn't even close, you know, nothing happened. So I was really torn. I really didn't know what to do. So yeah, it was a week later that I'd had a bit of, I think I was in sort of the latent phase of labour. I was at my mum's one Saturday afternoon, and I sort of thought, oh, these niggles feel, you know, a bit more intense than they have done. And I really felt it in my back and my pelvis. I almost felt myself opening up, and it wasn't very consistent with it coming and going. I couldn't time it. It was sort of would come for 10 minutes and then it would disappear, and then 20 minutes later it'd come for 5 minutes, and then so it wasn't regular. And actually I wouldn't describe it as even as contractions. It was just sort of these pregnancy niggles, and but I felt something was happening. I definitely felt like, oh, things are progressing now. And I think that's what helped me make the decision about the sweep. When I went for the next midwife appointment, we spent the first 20 minutes talking about induction, and I was so sad, and I was saying, I don't want the induction, and what about this? And she was a lovely midwife. All of these midwives were people I'd never met previously, no continuity of care at all in my area, unfortunately. I did have one midwife I saw 3 times, and she was lovely, but every single time I saw someone, it was usually someone who I'd never met before. So this midwife was really lovely, and she was trying to sort of talk me through induction and, you know, my options, and trying to sort of help me reframe my mind to see them in a bit more of a positive way, and that just because I might potentially be induced, it doesn't mean it's going to end the same way as my first birth. Anyway, I then said, you know what, let's go for a sweep. I said, let's just see where I'm at, and then I'll make the decision if I want you to do a sweep. And she was like, okay. So I jumped on the bed, and she sort of assessed me, and she said, oh, you're not getting induced. I said, what do you mean? And she said, you're 3 centimeters and you're ready to go. You're not. And I was like, oh. And honestly, it wasn't the sweep that did it. It was her saying that to me. I just let go. I was like, oh my God, like, we've just sat there for 20 minutes worrying about induction. We should have just done this first. She was like, yeah, you're not going to get there. Because I was 41 weeks at this point. So I knew, like, okay, I've got a few more days before induction date, or, you know, the date that I would be going in to be assessed to make the decision about induction was looming. And she was like, yeah, no, you're ready to go. And obviously, you know, the cervix isn't a crystal ball, as they say. You know, yes, I was 3 centimeters, but it didn't really mean anything. You just don't know, do you? So, and I kept saying that to her. I was sort of saying it to her. Yeah, even though it was me, I was going, don't get your hopes up. And she was like, okay, I won't. And I was like, because, you know, it doesn't mean I'm going to go into it. And she was going, okay, but remember, you can't go backwards. Your cervix isn't going to go backwards. You know, you're only going to progress forwards. So you're not going to get less dilated. So just focus on that, you know. And so she did the sweep, and I left. that was the Thursday morning she did sweep. And all day on Thursday I was saying to my husband, like, don't get your hopes up. And he was like, I've not even said anything. But obviously I was just telling myself to not get my hopes up. But I just had a really lovely day. We relaxed. We had just a normal day really, and I didn't think about induction probably for the first time in a couple of weeks. And we went to bed that night quite early, put my daughter to bed. We went to bed, and I woke up at 1 a.m. with a contraction. At the time, wasn't so sure if it was a contraction, which is ridiculous. And why do people get into denial about that they're in labour when they're clearly in labour? And I'd heard so many people say that they didn't believe that they were in labour. And to me, it's so obvious that they, oh, how did you think that? Of course you're in labour. Well, I was one of them. So I'd jump up every 5 minutes, hands and knees, breathe through it. And then I'd lay back down. And then 5 minutes later, I'd jump up and do the same thing. And my husband was like, should I go fill the pool up? I was like, no, I'm not in labour. Why would I be? I'm just 41 weeks and had a sweep this morning. This is just pregnancy niggles. And he's like, okay, well, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And then I started to think, well, I can't lay down through these. I literally had to get onto my hands and knees. There was no other position. So then I thought, maybe this is something more than like Braxton Hicks. So I told my partner, ring my mum and get her to come over at like 6 a.m. or something. It's still like 1:30 at this point. I said, because I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Labour lasts for such a long time. Like, if this is labour, we've got plenty of time. So don't even stress her out. Just tell her in the morning, can she come? And then about 10 minutes after that phone conversation, I said, ring her back and get her to come now, because things are progressing a bit quicker. I was timing my contractions and they were getting a bit closer and a bit closer and a bit closer. I rang the hospital that I'd been told to ring. I just explained what was going on with them, and they said, okay, they're not quite sort of 3 minutes apart yet. They've not been consistent for an hour, so give us a call back in an hour when they're a bit more consistent. So I put my TENS machine on, and I was just in my bedroom, hands and knees, just breathing through it, using a lot of my hypnobirthing techniques, the visualizations, the up breathing. And the TENS machine was great. And I used it in my first birth, and I didn't feel like it did that much, but my God, it was the best thing I could have done, is using that TENS machine. My mum arrived, and I have always said I would never want my mum at my birth, because I thought she would stress me out. And I was adamant. She was desperate to be there for my first, and I was adamant she wasn't coming. And she arrived, and my daughter was still sleeping, so she just sat in the room with me. She rubbed my back, and my husband's got everything ready downstairs, the pool and everything ready. And my mum just stood there silently and rubbed my back for 3.5 hours. In my head, it was like 20 minutes, but actually when I realised, I was like, oh my God, she's literally been stood there for so long and she's not said anything. So that was lovely, actually. We rang the midwife back again and sort of said, it's showtime now. And they said, are you sure you want a home birth? And I thought, goodness sake, just send someone. I've done this argument. I don't know how many. And she said, you can still come in if you want. And I said, no, I'm not coming. Just send someone now. So okay. And they did send someone, and the midwives that came were so lovely. The midwife arrived at 4:30. So I'd started at 1 a.m. and at 4:30 the midwife arrived, still upstairs, still with my TENS machine, hands and knees, breathing. And she said, would you like to have a vaginal check before we go any further, just before you get in the pool? And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be examined or not, but at the time I thought, you know what, I do. Before I get in the pool, I want to be checked, because I don't want to be checked once I'm in the pool. So I think now's a good time. It'll tell me whereabouts I'm at, even though that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It would just maybe give me, I don't know, something to cling on to. And I thought, I'm probably 5 or a 6. 6 at a push. I'm probably 5 centimeters. I'd worked it out, I've been in labour from 1 a.m. it's 4:30. I was already 3 centimeters. 6 would be good. So she checked me and she said, oh, you better hurry up, because you're 9.5 centimeters and you've got a bulging bag. And I was like, oh my God, I honestly could not. I thought, I've only been in labour 3.5 hours. What does she mean? Like, I honestly could. And my mum, she went, oh my God, I gave birth to your brother and I was only 8 centimeters. I'm not sure if that's true or if she's made that memory up, but she's adamant she was only 8 centimeters when she gave birth. But yeah, I thought, oh my God, me in this TENS machine, I've done so well. Like, I didn't want to take that TENS machine off. I'd hide it. I didn't want to send it back because I thought, me and this guy just, we know what to do. So yeah, ran downstairs because I thought I need to get down before the next contraction hit. So I ran downstairs, and my husband, oh, he'd made the room so lovely, exactly how I'd pictured it. And I used to say things to him like, I want this candle there, and I want that colour on the lights, and I want, and I was very specific. That's how it helped me. Like, if I could even imagine the colour of the towels, that helped me. And I swear he did not listen to me the whole time I was pregnant and I was saying these things. But clearly he had, because the room was just lovely and perfect. And I told him, put all the toys away. I don't want to see one toy. And he'd done all that. And we took the TENS machine off, which I was a bit scared to do, but it was fine. And I got in the pool, and it was so lovely to be in the water. It was just amazing to be in there. And I thought, okay, well, I'm 9 centimeters. I've got a bulging bag. So next thing, my bag's going to break, and then baby's going to be here. And it just happened a bit slower than that. It still happened quite quickly, but I kept thinking, when's my bag going to break? And I was sort of just, again, on my knees, hands over the side of the pool, breathing through the contractions, thinking each contraction, my waters is going to go this time. And then it didn't. Now, I know sometimes waters don't break at all, or right at the last minute. I know that, but in my head I was thinking that's what needs to happen next. I'd sort of convinced myself that was going to happen, and it didn't. I was contracting, and I could feel my baby moving down, but the waters were still intact. And I asked for some gas and air at this point, and I didn't feel like I needed it. I just thought, let's get it out ready because I might want it soon. But I think, I pretty much used it from the moment it was in my hands. But that was the only way the midwives knew I was having a contraction, because I did not make a peep in that water. And I was just breathing really calmly, and they would note down I'd had a contraction when I would take the gas and air. And there was a few times I didn't take the gas and air, and they said, oh, it's been 5 minutes since the last contraction. And I'd have to say, no, it hasn't. They were just like, you're so calm. They couldn't believe how calm I was. And they were such lovely midwives. They were so respectful. They didn't touch me once. They said to me right at the start, before I got in the pool, if your scar hurts where your section was, please tell us, but we are not going to ask you every 10 minutes. We just want you to tell us. And I was so grateful for that I didn't have to have that reminder that I'd got a scar, that I'd had a section. Jumped in the pool, used the gas and air, just breathing through the contractions. And then I felt a bit pushy, and I thought, oh, I can feel the head. And actually the midwife said, that's the bag of waters. It still hasn't gone, but it's right there. And so we made the decision that the next contraction day would break the waters for me, which they did. And, it was fine. The water was clear. One of my fears was that there was going to be meconium in the water, and that would be a reason to transfer. But the water was clear. That was fine. And then I started to feel pretty pushy after that. And that feeling of your body pushing your baby out was incredible. I'd heard about it, read about it, talked to people about their experience, but my God, it was unreal that I wasn't doing it, my body was doing it. And the first one really took me by surprise. And I did that little transition thing where you go, oh my God, I'm pushing. And everyone's like, that's okay. And then I went chill again, and I calmed down. And again, I know what transition is, but I thought, oh my God, what just happened to me? Started feeling that pushing sensation, again on my hands and knees, and I just breathed through it, and I pushed actively a little bit, but my body pretty much did all of the work. And the baby's head came, and it just felt like I opened up and then opened up some more. And I just thought, oh my God, I can't, I'm as open as I can get. And my body just did it. It did it for me. And the head came out. And at that point, my mum had sat on the top step of our stairs and was watching through the banister. So she saw me deliver the head. And we had 3.5 minutes between the head coming out and the body. And in those 3.5 minutes, my mum had come into my daughter's room because she'd woken up, and got her and came and sat on the top step with her. I didn't know this at the time. I sort of had my back to her. And they were saying, okay, on the next push, your baby's going to be here. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to push a baby out my vagina on my own, and I'm going to do it. Those 3 minutes, I'm so grateful for them, because I managed to savor that moment and think, I can feel my husband's hand, I can feel my baby's head, I'm doing this. And then, yeah, next push, baby came out, and the midwife said, turn around and pick your baby up. And I turned around and picked her up, and she was all slimy, and I was so shocked, I couldn't work out which way was up. And oh, it was just amazing. The midwife helped me. She was a bit wrapped up in a cord. The midwife helped me with that and put her on my chest. And I looked up and saw my 1-year-old, my daughter, sat on the top step with my mum, and I just burst into tears because I just couldn't believe I'd done it. And she had witnessed that. I mean, she probably won't remember, but it was just amazing that she was there. And the midwife said, what is it? Because we didn't know the sex. And I thought, it's a baby. And she said, no, what is it? And so I held her up, and me and my husband saw her and said, oh, it's a girl. And, you know, it was just incredible experience. And I just kept saying, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. And the midwife again, you did. You know, that was amazing. You did do it. And they were so kind. They were saying you were so calm. You were so collected. And my husband was saying you did so well. And oh, it really healed all of those wounds that were there. And just, it was such an incredible moment. I was so proud of myself for speaking up. And I thought, yes, that consultant that made me cry last week, and I said to my mum, get me a beer out of the fridge, and she was going, no, it's 8 a.m. You can't have a beer. And she was asking the midwife, she wants a beer, is she allowed to have a beer? And the midwives are like, yeah, get whatever she wants, you know, this is her day. So my mum brought me a beer, and I sipped my beer in the pool holding my baby, and I thought, yes, this is what I wanted, this is what I knew I could do. And to all those consultants that doubted women's experiences and women's intuition and the rights and opinions of women, I just thought, no, this F you, you know, like this, this is what it's about. And it was just amazing. After that, unfortunately, placenta did not want to come. My body was done then. Didn't have one single contraction after that baby was born. Placenta was just there, and I said, let's give it an hour, see how it goes. I wasn't opposed to having the hormone injection to get the placenta out, but I just thought, let's, you know, I've done it so far without any sort of medication, let's see if we can go all the way. And we tried a few different positions, and unfortunately it wasn't budging. So I got out the pool, had the injection, and it came away straight away, and you know, it was all fine. And after that, the midwives sort of checked me and said, oh, you do need a couple of stitches. We'd rather you be in hospital for them where it's sterile and, you know, the lighting's better. And they were so apologetic, though, that I would have to transfer in, but I was absolutely fine. I was like, no problem, like whatever you want, whatever we need to do. Yeah. And I said this to my mum, it's a medical procedure. Of course I'm happy to be in hospital to have a medical procedure. And she was like, but you just had a baby at home. I was like, yeah, that's not a medical procedure, Mum. Yeah. That's just natural. She was like, oh, okay then, sure. So yeah, we transferred in. That was fine. I felt ridiculous going in an ambulance because I honestly had never felt better in my life. I walked outside, I carried my bag, I carried the baby, and they were saying, you know, we have to get an ambulance. And I was so embarrassed that they did that, but it's protocol, so I guess that has to happen. Yeah, and we got there, had a lovely midwife who sort of checked me and did the stitches. And honestly, the stitches were probably the hardest part for me to deal with. I really wouldn't have described my birth as painful. It was just intense. And it was intense, but in a way that felt right. It didn't feel pain and wrong. It felt right. So yeah, had the stitches and then was home within an hour with the baby. So yeah, that was my experience.
Amazing, so emotional, isn't it? When people talk about their births like that, and it just sounds life-changing.
Yeah,
it sounds like it turns everything that we think we know upside down on its head, and we go, wow, look at what we can do.
Yeah.
And to me, it always really speaks of why women have been oppressed throughout history, because when we realize our power in this, we can do anything.
I always say to my husband, I used to believe in equality, but now I don't. Women are just better than men. And he laughs at me, and I'm like, I'm not joking. Like, you know, the pregnancy and birth and motherhood, like, it's just unreal. And it's just taken as like, well, that's what happens, you know, you're a woman, that's what you do. And I just don't think people realize, you know, how incredible it actually is. And I never realized myself until it happened. And I thought, wow, what have I've got such a lot in me that I didn't know about before. Yeah, and it is life-changing.
Really, really, yeah, transformative. And I think that's when we're working in birth, and we both do, and we know that this is possible. That's what we want everybody to get. We want everybody to experience that.
Even my husband is the same. He literally, anybody we know, whether they have children or they want children or they're pregnant or not, he tells them, you need to have a home birth. You need to have one, you know. And he straight away after we'd had my daughter, he said, are we going to have another one and have another home birth? Because that was amazing. I thought maybe let's give it more than 6 months this time.
Maybe a little bit later on, but people do feel like they're able to do it again when they've had those experiences. I mean, they don't always want to, and that's fine. But it's heartbreaking when you hear people who've done it once and then feel like they can't do it again because it was so traumatic. Because it does feel like, why would I put myself through that? But of course, that's exactly why healing birth is so important, because it proves to us that it doesn't ever have to be like that. It never did have to be like that in the first place, because we can still have really healing experiences no matter what happens. And you know, yours was a vaginal home birth, but not all healing births look like a vaginal home birth.
Exactly, yeah.
My healing birth was a caesarean birth. But similarly to you, I felt the same things. I felt, wow, look what I just did. Look what I just did, because I made the decisions and it was up to me how it happened. And I think it like brings us all together in this same place where we say, look how powerful we are and how amazing we are, and that we can do things. So do you think going forward in your life that things will be different for you because of this experience?
Definitely. I mean, I obviously work within sort of the birth community, but it's just pushed me to want to do so much more. I'm so much more just for myself and for me, but also career wise. It's really sort of made me view things differently, and I just want to share, you know, the knowledge that I have got with everyone else. But really that knowledge is just to tell people to educate themselves, to know their own circumstances and their own situation, and educate themselves on what is best for them. But I think this experience has definitely just made me grow in so many more ways than just sort of as a mother. It's made me really, there's things that I've always wanted to do that I've put off doing because I'm not sure I'd be able to do it, or I haven't got the confidence to do it necessarily. And I'm quite a confident person anyway, but there are certain things that I think I'm not smart enough, or I'm not, you know, whatever it might be. And this has made me realize, like, no, you can, whatever it is that you want to do, you can achieve it. You know, it just takes a bit of preparation and reframing your mind a little bit. So yeah, it's definitely affected me.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can't wait to see what you do. I mean, you're already saying that and feeling that just 6 weeks after giving birth. So
I know my husband keeps saying, well, let's just wait till the kids are older. Let's give it a few more weeks, because I did the same with my daughter. She was 6 weeks and I enrolled on my hypnobirthing course, and I'm already like itching to do things, but it's not as easy with a 6-week-old and a 1-year-old.
No. And there's plenty of time for it, but it's great that you're already thinking about how you can change your own life and change other people's lives through the work that you do.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'm so I don't even know what the words are. I'm so privileged to kind of bear witness to your story and to be able to share this with other people as well, so they can see that it's possible. You know, I feel privileged to have met you during pregnancy as well, and to have,
I can't thank you enough for the support that you gave me and throughout the pregnancy and now recently as well. And just having these conversations, it really has more of an impact than I think we realise sometimes. And I'm so grateful of your support. So thank you so much, and all the work you do. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. And I'm in here doing this work for the same reason as you, because my birth was traumatic and then I had the healing birth, and I need people to know that this is possible because it's so life-changing. So thank you so much for being part of that, and for joining me on this interview as well, so that we can share that far and wide amongst the people who need to hear it today, and tomorrow and the next day, because there's always going to be more. And take care, and I'll be watching out to see what you do next.
Thank you.